CBS News, this is Judy Muller. Soviet leader Shuttle in NASA's fleet, the Atlantis, is scheduled to lift off from the Kennedy Space Center. Just about everything concerning this mission, including the exact time of that launch and the military payload, is classified. The weather, however, is not classified information, and now it has become part of the story. Frank Motek reports.
Because of concern about the weather at launch time, the launch period has been extended from 10:20 a.m. to 2:20 this afternoon. The weather forecast at the Space Center calls for a 60% rain chance at launch time. However, NASA spokesman George Diller says Air Force meteorologists remain optimistic that the weather will cooperate.
Most of the cloudiness that would affect us is going to be south of the Cape area, and hopefully the rain showers that we see now will remain out over the ocean, out over the test range, and not move our direction.
NASA's best customer, the Defense Department, is using the Atlantis on a secret military mission, reportedly to launch 2 communication satellites. Frank Motek for CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
CBS News, this is Doug Poling. The 5 astronauts are ready, and so is the new Space Shuttle Atlantis, ready to begin a hush-hush flight into space. This one is for the Pentagon, and there's been a lot about this mission that's not revealed, including launch time, which is expected to be sometime in the next 3 to 4 hours. Chris Kelly has more on the story.
The mission is shrouded in as much secrecy as the Air Force can muster to prevent the Russians from getting a hand on what will go into orbit. Without disclosing launch time until 9 minutes beforehand, officials said the Soviets can only guess at the shuttle's orbit. The more they guess, said one official, the better for us. But various sources say 2 bomb-proof and jam-proof communication satellites will be put into orbit 22,000 miles up, part of a system to link Washington with U.S. forces in the event of nuclear war. The Air Force hopes to have 14 such devices by the early 1990s. This mission is expected to last 5 to 6 days. We'll get only a 24-hour advance alert to landing. Sometime next year, the government hopes to start launching secret shuttle missions from a military space complex in California. Chris Kelly, CBS News, Washington.
CBS News, I'm Richard C. Hartelet.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of Atlantis. A new orbiter joins the shuttle fleet, and it has cleared the tower.
This is Frank Motek at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The maiden launch of the Shuttle Atlantis went off without a hitch today. The 4th and final member of America's shuttle fleet thundered off the launch pad at 11:15 Eastern Time after a flawless countdown. The Atlantis is on a fully classified Defense Department mission, which reportedly involves the deployment of 2 military communication satellites. The exact launch time remained a secret until just 9 minutes before blastoff to make it more difficult for Soviet satellite and spy ships to monitor the flight. No information will be released on what the 5 astronauts aboard the Atlantis will be doing. The length of the mission is also a mystery. The shuttle's return to Edwards Air Force Base will be announced a day before the landing. Although the first flight of Atlantis is a secret mission, NASA officials have made no secret of how pleased they are with Atlantis's perfect inaugural launch. Frank Motek for CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
CBS News, this is Doug Poling. They're turning on the reactor at 3 Mile Island, the undamaged reactor at the site of the nation's worst nuclear power plant accident. The good one was shut down after its twin malfunctioned and had a near meltdown in 1979. More on the story from Robert Shackney.
In the first hours, everything is normal. No unexpected problems or hitches. And if all goes according to plan, engineers expect they'll start a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction between 2 and 3 this afternoon Eastern Time. This will be an extremely cautious first step. The amount of energy initially produced would not be enough to electrify an average household. There'll be several days of testing before the power levels are very slowly increased, a week or more before any electricity is actually transmitted, and months before the reactor is up to its full capacity of 800 million watts. A special squad of government inspectors was on duty before dawn today, found everything in order as the first control rods were withdrawn and cooling water purified. At mid-morning, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission gave its okay for the power plant to go critical for an atomic reaction to begin. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Washington.
startup comes a day after the U.S. Supreme Court rejected a request to block the action. Last night, 16 anti-nuclear demonstrators were arrested trying to block the front gate at the plant in Middletown, Pennsylvania. More news in a moment. This has been launched from the Kennedy Space Center along with its crew of 5 astronauts. Mission Control in Houston reported shortly after liftoff that all systems were functioning as planned.
The external tank doors following separation of the external tank were closed and latched. The auxiliary power units were shut down on time, and all of that was normal. We had routine ascent this morning, and the spacecraft appears to be in good health at this time. Atlantis crossing the coast of Africa just south of the equator.
A little later, Atlantis went into orbit without any hitches. There's a lot of secrecy about this flight, a military mission. There are reports Atlantis will deploy 2 communications satellites for the Air Force. And Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor have been chosen to be the first members of the new Women's Hall of Fame. They are to be inducted tonight at a reception and dinner in Washington. The Women's Hall of Fame was established by the National Women's Forum.
The Senate tries again today to keep the Treasury solvent. 10 are dead in a freak California freeway pileup. A London slum explodes in violence overnight. Good morning. Bill Lynch with the CBS World News Roundup.
CBS News, this is Frank Sedapani. Chrysler...
CBS News, I'm Richard C. Hottelet. Coming of Atlantis, the newest member of the U.S. Space Shuttle fleet, is scheduled to land about an hour from now at Edwards Air Force Base in California's Mojave Desert. Information about the shuttle's military payload was classified.
CBS News, this is Frank Sedapani. The Supreme Court has just completed its maiden mission on the floor of California's Mojave Desert. The return home today and the California landing ends an apparently successful 4-day secret flight to launch a pair of radiation-resistant communication satellites for the military. Bob Scott of CBS station KNX Los Angeles is at Edwards Air Force Base. Bob, how did that landing go?
It went just absolutely picture perfect. This is what we've come to expect of the shuttle landings. It swept in high over the Edwards Air Force Base area out of the western sky, sun gleaming off its white wings, and making a nice left-hand turn, came around and just approached the runway, head on into the wind practically, touched down smoothly. There was even, it appeared to be less of a kick-up of dust behind it today. It was just absolutely perfect. Bob Scott for CBS News, Edwards Air Force Base.
And back in Washington, the Supreme Court has, in its wisdom, decided it's best to let sleeping people lie. The High Court refusing today to disturb a lower court decision that struck down Pompano Beach, Florida's no-nap law. That law banned sleeping in cars and beaches on other public property. Frank Sedapani, CBS News.